So just a disclaimer, this is my verdict as a quality engineer, looking at the stats. And everything that I shared is only based on my personal experience. So Sony did it again. They just released a new camera out of nowhere, and it's called the Sony FX3. Even though they just released the Sony A7S3not even a year ago, which kind of almost have everything similar. But why? Before we dive into that, let's dive into what is the FX3 and what does it bring to the table. So the FX3 is an entry-level camera for the cinema lineup of Sony. They have tweaked the body of the A7S3 with a completely new design to custom all of their future users to the FX lineup. So the FX3 doesn't have a viewfinder and all of the buttons are shuffled. So instead of buying an external cage, everything is built into the chassis. And on top of that, they actually improved the heat dissipation by adding extra fan to the chassis itself. So that means that they want to make sure that this camera is as reliable as possible when you take it on any commercial shoot. But why would you get this camera instead of going with any of the other competitions? Well, let's dive into that. So I compiled the list of the entry-level cinema cameras for some of the major brands, including Canon, Lumix. I didn't put the Blackmagic cinema camera because I thought they fall into a different ball game, especially with the price point and the way that the body itself actually needs a lot of modifications and a lot of add-ons and accessories to be actually functional. So I just wanted to get something that was entry-level, that is good out of the box. So I put down the Sony A7S3 because the FX3, I don't want to say kind of, it actually is almost exactly the same camera except for the body. But I just wanted to compare that with entry-level Canon and the Lumix S1H. So going through the Canon EOS C100, this one is the cheapest camera when it comes to the cinema line for Canon, and the thing is that really kind of hinders it that it doesn't shoot in 4K. So that is out of the water, makes all of the other options more desirable for any starting filmmaker. So we're not going to touch on that. I just wanted to put it in as just a base point for the price, because so this camera is around $3,600 where you can get a Sony A7S3 for $3,500. Just keep that in mind. When we look at the FX3 and the C200 and the Lumix, the Sony weight is almost half of the C200 and very close to the Lumix, but a little bit less. They're trying their best to keep everything compact for anyone who wants to have a run and gun setup that is cinematic. But I wanted to touch base on something. The FX3 actually doesn't come with the viewfinder, while the A7S3 and the Lumix S1H does come with a viewfinder. And the reason is because both of them are hybrid cameras and they take pictures. And this is the thing that's very interesting. The FX3 actually can take still shots, but you have to rely on the LCD. So that tells me that they pretty much just moved everything from the A7S3 and just moved it in that body, and they just, you know what, they just kept it as a bonus. The bitrate of those cameras for the Sony lineup, there are 16-bit RAW, and the C200 is around 12-bit, and same as the Lumix. So the thing that stands out here is Sony shoots in a higher bitrate. For the RAW output, both the Sony and the Lumix can shoot RAW, but it has to be done externally with an HDMI output. However, the C200 can shoot internal, which makes it a very desirable option for something quick. But the thing is, with these cameras, it will behoove you to rig it up and take advantage of everything they can offer. The storage is kind of interesting though. The Lumix only has the SD memory cards, but all the other options have CF Express cards. And the big criticism here for Canon is that they don't have an IBIS. They always relied on the stabilization on the lenses, but that's something that is really up to you, because most likely if you're gonna lug it on a gimbal, you're gonna be okay. But if you're doing it on a shoulder rig, the IBIS might actually come in handy and help you reduce some of this shakes. But the thing that takes the Canon way ahead of the competition is the built-in ND filters. You don't need to buy any external NDs to make it work, and everything is built into the camera, which makes it a very, very competitive package out of the box. So when we look at the price range, the A7S3 is $3,500, FX is around $3,900, the 200B is around $5,300, and the Lumix around $4,000. Looking back at all of this, the C200 is the most expensive, but just keep in mind that it does have internal RAW recording and you can adapt all of the Canon glass, which is fantastic. So now when you look at the A7S3 and the FX3, like why would you buy the FX3 in the first place? Everything in the A7S3 looks pretty good already. It has everything, it's almost carbon copy of the FX3, so why would you actually invest in it? Well, here's the thing. The FX3 comes with the XLR handle unit, which is around 600 bucks. So if you're actually planning on buying that in the future, and if you're focused on filmmaking, that makes it a better option than the A7S3 in my opinion. So now that we've seen everything on paper, I think Sony's trying something bold here. They're trying to get everything compact and minimalistic and trying to lean into the new generation of filmmaker that's coming in. They're trying to be light, they're trying to live a minimalistic life, and I think they're just going with the trend. I think this is a great option for a B camera or anyone who's starting off in the industry, because the A7S3 is already a fantastic buy, but if you wanted to go and get used to the FX lineup and you're planning on buying it in the future, why not invest in that instead and get accustomed to all of these new functions and get used to the new technology. And I have this mentality that I keep thinking that, you know what, less is more. If you try to limit yourself, you can be more creative, unless you're actually on a very big client shoot. I mean, just do your due diligence and go rig the crap out of it. But if you're out and doing some shoots and trying to do some personal projects, I find myself, if I have a very bulky setup, I hardly use it. If it's someone who is a part-time filmmaker or hobbyist, I think this will be a very good fit because the size is attractive. I can actually put it in my backpack without worrying about anything, and I can just plug in a very good mic and have an indie film shot with a fraction of the price. And I, for one, I'm excited to see what Sony can bring next to the table. I think this is a very bold move from Sony. They're releasing the same camera in a separate body, but it's a little bit smaller. That means that all of this new technology they might explore, releasing that in a smaller compact package. And for me, that makes me very excited because I don't like to have a bulky setup. I've found myself leaning towards making all of my setup smaller as the time goes by, pretty much, and I want to keep that aesthetic. But for most of my work, I like to be on the street. I don't want to grab too much attention to myself, and I want to have a really nice setup that can produce cinematic quality. So I think the camera's demographic is going to be a lot of younger filmmakers that coming into the industry, and they just want to get their feet wet and try out this whole new cinematic world of film. And I think this camera is going to bring a lot of young blood into the industry, which is something I'm very, very excited about. Because now with everything that's happening around us, we're all sitting in, and media is the largest thing that we consume. We're going to see a lot of people being creative and making something crazy. And I want to see crazy. Well, I hope you like this video, and I will see you in the next one.